Okay, so we got an email from somebody who is, supports the Abbey and attends a lot of retreats and so on. And he's a healthcare worker. I think he works. He's a psychologist and does social work as well. Okay, so he's been working in hospitals, among other places, especially with families where there's somebody who's sick with COVID. So he wrote this. I want to read it because it really gives you a sense of what's going on in somebody's mind. And it could be very similar to what would go on in our mind in that situation and how to deal with it. So he says, I wonder if you could offer some advice about how us frontline workers and humanitarian workers can more effectively approach our work without getting burnt out. Okay. For example, I was at the hospital today and I found myself for the very first time in my helper role getting angry and even experienced a mild panic attack while assisting a family in crisis. So he's been doing this work for a while and first time. Okay. Thankfully, nobody noticed, and I was able to perform without buckling into the panic and exhaustion. Due to confidentiality, I will not reveal the exact scenario, but it all involves COVID trauma and life and crisis situations. There is also tension between some of the professionals here because they are so exhausted. I see the most difficult things for medical people is having to tell family members they cannot say goodbye to their loved ones due to the restrictions. Interesting, because you could say the most difficult thing for them would be not to be able to save the person, because some medical professionals, that's really difficult for them when they lose patients. But here it is, the family situation, having to say no to the family members for their own safety, because they want to go in and hug and kiss and embrace and hold the hand of the person who's dying from COVID, but that would only infect them and, possibly lead them to such a serious state as well. So only a few people can come into the rooms, even when someone is dying. This causes a great deal of anger and even sometimes aggression from family members. So it's interesting here, isn't it? Because the healthcare professionals are saying this for the benefit of the family member. Yeah, but the family member sees it as they're interfering with my relationship with my loved one. So to me, this makes me step back and wonder how many times in my relationships with people are saying something for my benefit, but I misinterpret it and think that they're calling me out on something or they're interfering with what I want to do when that isn't their intention at all. Yeah. So you can understand the stress in the minds of the families. Yeah. But we also received a short write-up from another one of our friends who works in hospitals as a healthcare professional. And she was saying that, there's kindness on the part of the healthcare professionals, and there's also kindness on the part of the patient and the families who can rise to the occasion, even though it's difficult. Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting that she pointed that out, because we sometimes tend to think that there's one person who's advantaged and one person who's disadvantaged, and the disadvantaged person has no responsibility and the advantaged person has to fix it, And here I'm talking about advantage, disadvantage in terms of health care professional and patient. But as our second friend pointed out, the patient, the family also can be kind to the healthcare professionals. Yeah. And that maybe they, in spite of the tragedy they're experiencing, they can try and step forward and be a kind family, be a kind patient. Yeah. Instead of just saying, this is such a horrible situation and kind of losing it. Yeah. Because I know when I was in the hospital recently for my hip replacement, I very strongly felt the kindness of so many healthcare professionals. And I felt a responsibility to be a good patient and not make their life difficult. Yeah. And the same when I came back here, I tried not to complain. I don't know, Venerable Jigme, was I a whiner or was I good? Yeah. Because, I didn't want, I realized people are going out of their way here to help me when I can't do things. And I want to, at least be kind and friendly back. Yeah. And help them out because they're helping me. Same way with the physical therapist. He's spending all this time helping me. I need to do my exercises. It's a two-way thing. So that's just a commentary I wanted to make on this situation when you have a healthcare professional with people who are so overwhelmed that they don't see their own ability to be kind and compassionate in response to the people who are trying to help them. Okay, so he goes on. Today I felt overwhelmed with sadness and grief, imagining the details of how all these families must feel. However, my own exhaustion began to set in. For the first time in my career, I actually began to feel anger and had the desire to quit. Okay. Now, when that happens, that's a red button. That's an alarm. It's not telling you that the situation is out of hand. It's telling you that you need to rest. Okay? Yeah. But often when we're in the role of helping, we see the other person's need. We know we can help, or we think we can help, and we want to help, and so we push ourselves. Yeah. Sometimes nudging ourselves, like in that first case, he made it through and he helped somebody. But other times, nudging ourselves is too much, It's as if we think that we're already Buddhas, or we should be Buddhas, when we have a human body and we're limited by what our human body can do. Okay, so I have not been sleeping well due to juggling all these various helping roles, because he's also treating soldiers, working with torture victims in his NGO, and now the part-time hospital work. I was so tired, I almost felt I was going to collapse. After I left the unit, I went to my car and fell into bed for the last 6 hours. I tried taking and giving meditation. That helped to recenter me. So that's really nice that he turned to the Dharma and that helped. But you slept for only 6 hours? You needed to sleep more, Because the thing is, when our own body and mind are not balanced, our ability to give help is impeded. And so it's a difficult situation because you have to see, okay, is it a situation where maybe I can nudge myself a little bit, I can handle the situation, it doesn't take too long, and then I'll go and rest? Or is this a situation where I'm really at the edge here and I'm not going to be effective if I nudge myself to help? In fact, it's time for me to ask for help, and so that the person that I want to help can have help that helps them. Now, of course, from what we're hearing from people who are frontline workers is that there's nobody else to call as your substitute because everybody is stretched that thin. Okay, and in that kind of situation, we need to just accept we need to accept the situation. It's like, it's a horrible situation. You want to help everybody, and all these people need help. And you have to face the reality of having a human body. And you have to face the reality of not being able to control everything you would like to be able to control in life. And you have to face the reality that other people's karma is playing into this. That's not an excuse to not help them. That's a way to help you accept the situation, that it's more, that this situation is due and is influenced by much more than your own will and your own ability to control. Yeah, that there's other things at play here. Okay. Due to my credentials and the desire to help and wanting to use my life for a purpose, to be as compassionate and useful as possible, I feel a moral and ethical responsibility to step up and serve whenever and however I can. And that is wonderful. That is beautiful. That is honorable and to be appreciated and respected, to have that motivation. However, can you comment on how one may do this more effectively or more wisely? Is it selfish to say this is too much? I think many healthcare providers are experiencing these inner conflicts recently. Okay. So it makes me reflect on a couple of different things in my life. One is, previously, there would be in one job I had in a Dharma center, in a temple, so many people coming and so many people having needs and having a lot of responsibility and wanting to help and yet being exhausted. Yeah. And comparing myself to my teacher who doesn't sleep and thinking, if I only had more compassion, I could help all these people. I need to rest because I lack compassion. What a bad Dharma practitioner I am. I'm so selfish. If I only had more compassion, I could push through this. So I beat myself up like that for a period of time until I realized that mental state does not help myself or anybody else. Okay? Expecting myself to be like my teacher, there's a big difference between his ability and my ability. Expecting myself to act like a bodhisattva, even though I have a human body and a mind that is out of control, also unrealistic. That is not an excuse to not try. That is not an excuse to not nudge myself, to just the moment I feel tired saying, well, yeah, I'm not a bodhisattva. see you later, hope you're okay. It's not a thing to just be self-indulgent. And every time, my little toe hurts, to totally say, oh, I've got to take care of myself, because if I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of anybody, because that's just true self-centeredness, isn't it? As if I'm the only person whose little toe hurts. There's lots of people who have big toes that hurt, and they hurt more than my little toe, So it's not an excuse, but it's this thing of really looking at what is practical and possible. Yeah. And when can I actually do something and when can't I? Yeah. And when do I have to say, I want to do it, but I can't right now? Maybe tomorrow. Not like, I can't do it forever. I'm going to go sleep, for as long as I want. And then after that, I'm going to take a bubble bath. And after that, I'm going to go out and have a wonderful meal. And after that, I'm going to sleep some more. No, it's not saying that. It's saying right now, there's things I need to do to take care of myself. And then I'm coming back to help because that's what I really want to do. It also, this situation reminds me of something when they talk about the bodhisattva actions. And I think it may have come up in some of the Jataka tales, where there's a situation where a group of people are stranded and they need help. And there's like everybody's hungry and there's a limited amount of food, and they're stranded. And my mind automatically thinks there's a limited amount of food. You divide it up equally amongst all the people there. Maybe if somebody's weaker, you give them a little bit more, but it's evenly divided. In the Jataka tale, it was you give the food to the person who is the strongest, so that they can go out and look for help that will come and rescue the whole group. Whereas if you distribute it equally, nobody will have the strength to go out and look for help. And I remember, hearing that and like, wow, that's a very different attitude than my democratic, everybody is equal attitude. And in some situations, it's probably much more effective and practical to reinforce the strength of the person who's stronger so that they can seek more help. Yeah. So what it leaves me with just, again, this thing of trying to assess what I'm capable of at a particular moment and what I'm not capable of, despite my aspiration and what I would like to be or what I would like to be able to do. Okay. When I came home tonight, I happened to turn on the TV and noticed 60 Minutes was doing a story on a famous celebrity singer. The contrast between this singer and her life of fame, fortune, self-centeredness, living in a mansion in Spain, talking about how fulfilled she is as a singer, compared to the medical staff at the hospital today and the families, increased my confusion and even anger. It seems as though our country, or perhaps the Western world, seems so disconnected from things. And that is really true. Yeah. I think very often people live being afraid of being the person who's sick or being afraid of being the frontline worker. And so then they want their fame and their fortune and their glory and their nice, comfortable things. And there's an element of fear pushing them to have that so that they don't become, in abject suffering. But then when they're not in touch with that fear, then they neglect the people who are in that kind of suffering. Yeah. And I think this is what the Bodhisattva practice, and especially the taking and giving meditation, is emphasizing to us, is even if you can't do something, either because you're not the right person, you're not in the right location, you don't have the skill, you're exhausted, whatever it is, don't lose the heart connection with the people who need the help. Yeah. So keep your compassion alive, keep your love alive, even though at that moment you can't help directly. Yeah. And I think it is helpful for us when the situation is reversed and we're in a lot of suffering to think there's bodhisattvas and Buddhas and ordinary Dharma practitioners who are remembering me and having and having compassion for my situation. I think that helps us to remember, because so often when we're suffering, we feel like the world is cold and there's nobody on our side. And I'm sure that's how many of those families felt. Just let me in to see my loved one. Why are you keeping me from that? Without seeing the compassion that is there. Whereas when we can see others' compassion, it modifies our suffering, especially the mental suffering. And when you modify the mental suffering, you also lessen the physical suffering, I think. Okay. So, what comments do I have about this? Just basically what I gave. And I mean, the really difficult part is wanting to help and not being able to. Yeah. And I know as a young person, when I was in college, boy, I was in fire. I wanted to change everything. And then realizing, I can't. And it's not just because I'm lacking. It's because there's many other causes and conditions that are out of my control. So the point of becoming a Buddha is that we eliminate the hindrances from our side to helping. We eliminate our self-centeredness, our lack of wisdom, our lack of skill, okay? But we can't, but other living beings and the other have karma, and there's also so many other factors that we don't have control over. So those things balance out, and we have to work within that difficult situation as best as we can, without beating ourselves up, because when we beat ourselves up, then we are creating more hindrances to help people. And without being self-indulgent, because when we are self-indulgent, we are also creating more hindrances to being a benefit. So it's this famous middle way that is so hard to recognize. But that's the reality of the situation. Yeah. So to all the frontline workers and the healthcare workers who are struggling themselves with this kind of issue, please know that many of us have compassion for you, and not only for your exhaustion, but through the the mental and emotional difficulties of doing that job. Yeah, and we thank you for what you're doing. And may we, in our own way, repay your kindness and reach out and help the people who are ill for COVID, or act as a support for the families that are suffering. So in our way, we get many, many emails from people asking us to pray for their relatives who are sick with COVID or who have died with COVID or other illnesses and injuries. Yeah. So we do that. We write to these people, if they have questions and need help and spiritual counseling. So that's one way we can reach out and help. Yeah. And as we practice more, we'll be able to help more.